Welcome to the Movie Guys and our love fest to man, myth, legend Harrison Ford. Let me get straight to the point. We're watching his whole catalog and breaking down his every role in every film in something we like to call the Ford Fiesta. I'm Paul Potomac Two-Step Preston.
And I'm Adam Witness. This is our 5th episode of the Ford Fiesta, wrapping up Harrison Ford's time in obscurity. From here on in, he's in the spotlight.
Yes, as last, I have a hard time finding him in this movie film. And the topic of today's show is Getting Straight, a movie made in 1970 that might as well be called 1970 the Movie. We're going to talk all about it today, and if you're new to the show, it's still a little fresh to a lot of people, so help us out by liking, commenting on the show. We will respond. Subscribe where you can, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, YouTube, and more, and visit themovieguys.net for more shenanigans. And of course, at The Movie Guys all over social, because social media is where talk about the show can just take off.
I understand its power now.
So, you haven't seen Getting Straight, we rightly assume, and no doubt want to know what it's about. We'll help you out with our movie recap in just a sec, and later on we'll converse about the film and give our thoughts. But if you want to hear from two people in love with Getting Straight, look no further than a conversation Adam sent to me between Quentin Tarantino and Kim Morgan at a Swingin' 60s marathon. It's on YouTube. You can just search it, Quentin Tarantino Getting Straight, and I'm sure it'll come right up. And it's pretty interesting because I don't know how often that happens to you, Adam, but Getting Straight, I was like, that's all right. And then when you hear two people just in love with a movie, you reflect on yourself and go, geez, what did I miss? Am I a jerk? Did I get it wrong? Or
no, I give some... I poke this movie in the ribs a lot, and it earns that plenty, but I can see the masterpiece that he sees in it. I mean, I can see all the things. I mean, you got to be forgiving about other things that may not play completely, but, I see it. I don't think he mentions Harrison Ford once, which is hilarious.
Yeah, he does not. No, I listened to the whole, it's like 9 minutes or whatever.
He's into this movie because it's from the director of The Stuntman, from Laszlo Kovacs. He's like all straight, hammered down on the filminess of it. He's forgotten that Harrison Ford is in this movie.
Well, we have not. So that brings us to... what's new in the world of Harrison Ford? Well, let's see. We have... well, not much. So once again, the news cycle on Harrison Ford is grasping. I found a website devoted to watches that has a new article all about the Breitling Navitimer Pluton 2011 PVD military-assigned French aviation watch that Harrison Ford wore in a promo pic from 1984. Wow. This is a new article about that photo. It's a true pilot's watch with military time, and the author of the article would love to know how he got it. And sure enough, there was a big discussion in the comments.
You talk too much.
Watch collectors are like any other collectors. There are people with hundreds of watches, and you and I would see that 1984 promo pic. I don't know which one this is. I'm sure as soon as I see it, I'm like, I would know it.
I think it was just him. That's the thing. It was in the era of Temple of Doom, so he's looking like that, but he's having a coffee or whatever, but they noticed, he's got a Breitling Navitimer Pluton 2011 PVD military-assigned French aviation watch. And there's theories must have got it at Cannes, right? He was at Cannes.
You and I would look at that and see something completely different, which is like, oh man, Harrison Ford looks so awesome. That's amazing. Can you imagine that? Being on set with him?
Well, somebody else who is a fake us commented what really we would have said, which is, it belongs in a museum.
Nice.
Which I appreciate. Oh, and there was a follow-up to a previous news story. We talked here about how Harrison Ford went to Helen's Bikes in Santa Monica.
I love how little Harrison Ford news there is. We are following up on the story of him going and getting a bike in Santa Monica.
Daily Mail was all over it. Because I guess when he went before, he must have dropped his bike off, so now it's come back because it's been serviced and he's picking it up. There's so much going on.
I never thought of that as two stories, but the Daily Mail, they're on it. They're like, not only is he there, but he's going to have to come back.
We're sending a guy 2-3 days later because,
falling asleep in the lap of the TMZ guy.
And, well, here at the further grasping, you can still Google Harrison Ford news today, like I do every time we do this show. And I had to finally bring it up because it comes up all the time, but I just ignore it. But it continues to come up. Articles about, did you know Harrison Ford wasn't the first choice for Indiana Jones?
Oh, God, yeah.
Yes, we do. It was Tom Selleck. For the love of God, we've known it for 40 years.
It's true.
But in the days before the internet and even ready access to libraries sometimes, how would you find out? And yet we knew that Tom Selleck almost played Indiana Jones. That made it through the internet of fourth graders or whatever we were.
Yeah, and it's still very, very high on Harrison Ford news searches. 2 or 3 different articles letting you know, in case you didn't. And, of course, one more quick recurring show segment we get to before we get to getting straight. This date in Ford history. Now, it's just approaching mid-March now. This will air.
Give me a bigger one, Paul. This date! I don't think we're appropriately, we're celebrating that enough.
We don't have that pre-recorded. We're going to have to work on some production value version of that. All right, so one more quick recurring show segment. This is dated in Ford art history.
Perfect.
March 13th. So again, this probably air mid-April, but this is mid-March now. And in 1997, on March 13th, The Devil's Own is released. Another one of those January to March Ford movies. Now that we've gone through those months doing the show, there are more than I remember. I always thought he was a summer blockbuster guy, but he keeps putting out ones.
Well, you made the point in our first episode that one of these Dayton Ford history that it was a rare February release, but I've been surprised as we keep going along that that Harrison Ford has put out so many movies. We're not going to go too many weeks without a release at some point in his career happening nearby.
Yeah, every month we'll have multiple releases. And then March 14th, 1983 is when Ford married Melissa Matheson. Now, when I was talking to somebody that we were doing the show, they were talking about the personal life implications and how the film career affected them. And so we haven't talked about that yet. So this is a good time to bring that up because he didn't marry Melissa Matheson, the screenwriter of E.T., until 1983. E.T. had come out and they had met and got married. But since the early 60s, he was married to Mary Marquardt, and Mary Marquardt is the mother to his 2 kids, Ben, who's this famous chef, and Malcolm. So you're looking at, right now he's got these bit parts, and he's probably thrilled. He's like, I got 2 kids. I'm so happy that Columbia's taken me under their wing for, all these films and TV shows, and then jumping over to Universal and doing Time for Killing, and now back to Columbia, I think, right, for Getting Straight. So the work's constant, and you kind of see how, okay, well, this must be great for him, even if they're small parts, to get something going on, where because he's got a burgeoning family.
Yeah, I mean, when he first moved to LA, I remember reading some article. It was, it was so thin that that's why I think he picked up carpentry. Or it might have been when he finally bought a house, maybe with this money, that he took up carpentry because the house was a dump. They bought a real cheap place just so they could have any place to live. And so he ended up fixing up the whole place himself, reading out of books like on carpentry and slowly buying the equipment and stuff. So that, anyway.
Yeah, like an actor does. Every actor's got the back pocket gig. His is just, of course, super famous because for reasons we'll get to in future episodes. But so Getting Straight. Now, what exactly is this thing that keeps us from watching American Graffiti for one more week? Questions like that are exactly why we have our patented Movie Guys recap. Let's do it.
No way he's a movie star in any other decade. Actor Elliott Gould plays Harry Bailey, a caricature of the 1960s college intellectual. Harry is slacking his way through his master's degree in teaching with a minor in grad student soliloquies about how the world works at navel-gazing university.
60s campus culture is sent up in the characters that surround Harry and the many political opinions they have and have and have. The movie moves from one random comment on society to another, Native Americans to Buddhists to James Baldwin to racism to the war. It almost moves faster than society's ability to churn out ills. Everybody Harry runs into lectures on their political cause, including the Mac himself, Max Julian, who's demanding the college add a pimp studies department.
Harry's older than the campus youths and finds himself on the periphery of the student protests looking in, having been away from the school for 6 years in Vietnam, although the word Vietnam is never spoken. Quick with a smartass comment, Harry annoys the college authority figures he's supposed to be sucking up, but what's an Elliott Gould to do?
And what else can go wrong? Oh yeah, he's broke. Really broke. And if you don't believe me, ask the movie and its many scenes of Harry's disaster of a car that emits sparks, smoke, fire, and sprays oil like a fountain all over the windshield like he's driving a '59 Buick Poltergeist. While many of the liberated conversations in this movie could be found in early Woody Allen, this moment definitely has a kinship with Bananas.
But you can't have a well-rounded life of conflict without also making a woman's life hell. And the joy of dating this mouthy outcast falls to Jan, played by Candice Bergen, an icon of counterculture and feminism who unfortunately is still dating in a world where guys who look like Gabe Kaplan are romantic leads. On a long enough timeline, the chances of not being lectured by Harry drop to zero, and so it is with Jan's relationship with Harry. At any time, a romantic moment can be broken with Harry yelling his thoughts on sexual liberation at her face.
Does a lot of that. An ensemble of single-panel cartoon hippies and 60s culture types enter and exit Harry's campus adventures, including 60s the person, Nick, who went as Peter Fonda for Halloween and never took the costume off. Every time Nick enters the scene, he's got a brand new way to dodge the draft. He's Buddhist, he's gay, he's a Native American, his father was Fred Trump. By the end of the movie, he comes across a foolproof plan to not get drafted and voluntarily joins the Marines.
That'll show him. But that's not the hippie we're here to talk about.
Oh, no.
Oh, Harry, Jan.
Harrison Ford plays Jake, an artist Harry runs into at all of Jan's parties.
You weren't going to walk by, were you? I was waiting for you. We were having a party. You left the door open. We were waiting for you.
Which become learn-ins, with everyone diminishing the previous speaker's point to lecture the crowd on their point. Not to be out highbrowed by a room with that many options, Harry goes into a full Bill Maher new rules segment.
Why protest on the campus? Why not out in the real world where it'll do some good? You want to sell draft tips? Forget about college kids. I mean, they'll take care of themselves. Set your booth outside of a munitions factory where those poor, ignorant suckers don't have a chance. Of course, you just might get your teeth kicked in for your trouble.
Learn-ins. What a treat. Harry has dinner at Jan's parents in the suburbs, and Dad shoves combative political arguments into the conversation long before Fox News would become the official sponsor of Thanksgiving. After all, in 1970, Rupert Murdoch would have only been 60. Harry either delivers a political monologue or gives a line reading from most plays being written in this school's theater department. Candice Bergen's had it, an okay boomer's Harry, telling him, "If you're so goddamn smart, why can't you make me happy?"
Harry faces the eternal question of the free thinker: join the kids or sell out and suck up to the man to get his master's degree. He sells out, but within the hermetically sealed bubble of college. This means giving campus tours. Oh no, the subjugation of his soul!
As the date for Harry's master's oral,
Pardon me? What'd you say?
approaches, Jan leaves Harry and sides with the youth, joining the campus protests, which rise in intensity and frequency. Harry goes over to Jan's to try and reconcile with her, only to come face to face with Random Ford.
How's everything?
Harrison Ford's Jake the Avant-Garde artist greets him at the door.
Just have a few people over. Why don't you come on in?
The scene reveals that Jan has left him for not Harrison Ford, but rather a truly pointy-headed academician, complete with sweater, pipe, loftier ideals, and even less connection to the outside world.
And this is my friend, Dr. Bill Greengrass.
He's asked her to marry him, and with Harrison Ford standing right there, Candice Bergen considers this guy might be the best she'll do.
The campus protests, who have settled on the generic message of action now. Just anything anybody wants to do, just some action. We're just concerned there is a lack of it.
Protest.
Protest. When it grows big enough to threaten the straights, who decide the only way to raise the tensions higher is to call on the National Guard, which the protesters protest. The disparity in Harry's decision to abandon politics for a car that runs is obvious to him as he passes the chaos to give his master's oral.
That's what I thought you said.
In contrast, the window onto the world behind Harry shows the protests turning violent as the National Guard clashes with the students as he gives his master's oral.
If I go down, you're going with me.
Harry sees their lecture and raises them one soapbox, two harangues, and a spiel.
If you didn't want them to think, you shouldn't have given them library cards. Now it's too late. Let go. Stop trying to hold back the hands of the clock. It'll tear your arms out.
And 1 credit hour short of knowing it all, he throws it all away.
He turns the presentation into its own riot, standing on the table, yelling, throwing papers, and exercising his internal conflicts.
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
Harry and Jan meet up amidst the tear gas and batons and helicopters and riots and 60s. Jan has left her fiancé saying, "I don't like it. I don't belong there." Harry tells her he's blown his master's oral.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
And gives the same reason. What could be the creed of all wandering souls? I don't like it. I don't belong there. Because that speaks to you kids, right? You kids catching all this youth? Yes, and that's Getting Straight. And if you're confused, so was I when I watched it. This is a 1970 feature, and Harrison Ford has now gone back to Columbia after jumping to Universal for Journey to Shiloh. His contract expired, which is the thing they did back then, and he just went back to Columbia to make this one. And as I research online, there's no budget listed. So, it was tougher to find a budget for some movies back then. It's clearly out there now because box office is so important post-Star Wars. But this, of course, 7 years before Star Wars. So we don't know what it cost. But in the tagline, America's children lay it on the line.
And don't they ever?
Yes, well, about 2/3 of the way through the movie. Yeah. So as we go along and do this podcast, I'm going to mention, our experience with the movie, because with a lot of Harrison Ford movies, we have this long history of when we saw it and what it's meant to us, who we shared it with, how it holds up. This, of course, is the fifth in a string of movies that we're just seeing for the first time.
Yes.
So there's none of that. But the experience I did have in the short amount of time was still pretty entertaining. Like I started typing in Getting Straight, and Amazon was sure I didn't mean that. You're not renting Getting Straight. We don't even know that we have this movie here. Surely you mean Just Getting Started with Morgan Freeman and Tommy Lee Jones. No, I mean Getting Straight. Hey, surely you mean Rachel getting married with Anne Hathaway. No, I mean Getting Straight. No, surely you mean Getting Even with Dad. Anything, but it's like, nope, I mean Getting Straight.
Even with Dad.
No one rents this, to the point where twice during the movie I got the spinning circle interrupting my feed to say this. We're not even streaming this now, but
well, I'm having a great time. I don't know about you, Paul, but this is
absolutely
what a revelation. Another this journey of, what are we, 5 Harrison Ford movies in? And this is the end of a certain phase in Harrison Ford, because the next movie we're going to be covering will be American Graffiti. Actually, I guess that's the end of Harrison Ford phase 1, if we're to turn into Marvel phases, right? And then we head into a whole different phase. But this is, you never know what Harrison Ford you're going to get.
Not now. No, I mean, and I'm sure it'll waver. Well, it won't even waver that much after American Graffiti. We'll get Heroes, but then he's kind of, Harrison, Hanover Street, he'll be kind of heroish. Forced In from Navarone, he'll be heroish. Then he locks into that, and then he breaks out of that to become something that still infuses the character we saw in those action movies. So now it's whatever the heck. Yeah, absolutely.
The fun thing about watching these first few movies, and now this is going to go away. This is the end of this. At what point is Harrison Ford going to enter the movie we're watching? We're not going to have that question anymore. I think 3 times in the movie he opens a door, like a door gets opened and it's Harrison Ford.
Oh, Harry, Jan, wait. Hey, you weren't going to walk by, were you? I was waiting for you. We were having a party. You left the door open. We were waiting for you.
One time looking at a total POV shot, that whole scene goes into a POV thing. And so you're like staring right into Harrison Ford's eyes. But, it was maybe a half hour into this movie, and you start to get that suspense. And you're like, ooh, when's Harrison Ford going to show up? This was what was so annoying about A Time for Killing is like, he came up right away, and that was it. Then you had the whole 90 more minutes of a movie without Harrison Ford. But this and a few other ones, you're like, ooh, at what point's he going to show up? At what point's he going to show up? And he shows up, it doesn't disappoint, and a very different Harrison Ford than we've seen before or ever will. I think this might be the only of this Harrison Ford.
I found a little bit frantic. When's the last time you saw Frantic?
The day we got the VCR.
There's the one point he pretends to be a boyfriend of some character, and he's like pretending to be drunk, and he's like, "Hey man, you get out of here, man!" And he's kind of doing this hippie character that he is in this. When we do Frantic, you'll remember. You'll go, oh, okay, he's pulling a little Getting Straight out. One of his little bag of tricks. He doesn't pull it out often.
That's the fun thing about now revisiting the other Harrison Ford movies is we would never have said, ooh, we're getting a little bit of a Getting Straight Harrison Ford in this movie back when you saw that.
Yeah, we could share that with each other. Everyone else will just go, I'm sorry?
And then the second time, a door is opened, and suddenly that's the one where Harrison Ford's looking at the point of view. But after those first two, I was like, any door that's opened, could be opened by Harrison Ford. For the rest of the movie, I had this great experience. I was like, please tell me, because every time you go to a door, I'm like, oh, please tell me Harrison Ford's behind that door.
Yeah, obviously we've gone over the plot for this. By the end, the students are revolting on the campus, and his third appearance is in the middle of that. He kind of just runs up to Elliott Gould. He says my favorite line in the whole movie. He's accused by this character, Nick, who's been trying to dodge the draft the whole movie, of being like a subversive painter or having subversive art on campus. And he says, tell me, man, my wife's ass is a subversive painting?
And he's crazy. He's trying to get me kicked out of the art department for subversive painting.
Oh, Christ, he's really flipped.
I mean, my wife's ass is a subversive painting.
And then they cut away. Like, he had the outline of the scene with the weirdest, funniest line in the whole movie.
Yeah, it's really funny how he shows up for just a moment. And the scenes, every time he shows up, the scenes go on for a long time. And he never shows up again. He just comes in with like 2 weird lines. My wife's ass is a subversive painting.
There's a t-shirt.
There's a t-shirt.
So who do we see most of the time? Elliott Gould, right? Just coming off of MASH and Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, so he's like a hot commodity. Is there anybody like Elliott Gould today? Can you compare any current actor to Elliott Gould and his sort of bizarre full mustache 60s and 70s career? I mean, it's hard to do.
I am unprepared to answer that question.
I'll tell you, Sacha Baron Cohen looks like him playing Abby Hoffman, but that's
Nick Offerman.
That's just looking.
Like every time Nick Offerman shows up,
yeah, you can't see Nick Offerman yelling as much as Elliott Gould does in this movie. Good Lord, the yelling.
Yeah, and Elliott Gould gets full front and center to rant so many times in this movie. It might be the most Elliott Gould movie, including how hard I've told he is to work with. Like that the guy we're getting that's a total jerk in this movie too. I'm like, yeah, that's what I heard it was like to work with him for the directors as well. I would say all the movies we've watched so far have tried to be 1968 movies, but were clearly written with a different mindset and having that counterculture shoved into the movies. That's been kind of fascinating that like there's no free love thing in Love, but it's such a hot commodity. It's such a thing we want to try and get in the movie that we want to give the illusion that there's a 3-way.
Journey to Shiloh, to your point, it has themes of war that reflect the Vietnam War, but it's of course set in the Old West, so it's not about it. But here's the bullseye, is what you're saying.
Right. Well, and also in terms of cast, like in this movie, you've got Elliott Gould and Candice Bergen, and they were true counterculture poster children. So this is a real hippie movie.
And we have her before Carnal Knowledge, so I mean, it's
Carnal Knowledge is a good thing to discuss as well, because the script for this clearly needed to be directed by someone other than Richard Rush. This movie wants to be directed by Woody Allen or Mike Nichols, and so therefore a lot of this all comes off clunky. It's like stop down and monologue to make sure you've still got the hippie grad school students' attention. Over and over in this movie,
The quick deep dive on Richard Rush. He started with movies like Hell's Angels on Wheels and Thunder Alley, and went on to make this, and then Freebie and the Bean, speaking of James Caan. And then in 1980, he makes The Stuntman. And The Stuntman with Peter O'Toole gets 2 Oscar nominations. His name's on both of them, or they might have got 3, but I know he got 2, director and script, for that movie. He disappears. He's gone for 14 years. It comes out with Color of Night, the crap Bruce Willis like sex thriller.
That was Richard Rush?
But that's it. So he's like, I don't know what happened there, but the stuntman did him in or something.
And then the one other thing I'll say about Richard Rush is that he will go into a very wacky way to shoot certain scenes. Certain scenes will just pop into a style. He's talking to one of the professors, and it goes into this huge fisheye lens where the guy's like nose is all, and then it goes back. He types on the typewriter, and it cuts below the typewriter from the typewriter's point of view. Anything goes, The way this campus is set up with all the walkways and he shoots the hell out of it and uses the sort of depth of field Robert Altman style of zooming in, but I seem to remember that from The Stuntman as well. So I was very intrigued at how this kind of cool campus they found was shot.
I got two stories on that. Lane Community College, I guess in Oregon, is where they shot, and it was still being built, so it wasn't even a campus yet. So they were building it, and they said, let's go in and trash it, and then rebuild it, and you can have your campus back. So they were able to do all sorts of stuff. I think they smashed a couple of things that they had to pay for, and blew up some things they had to apologize for. But, so they could take advantage of everything. They weren't putting anybody out, basically, to shoot this, so which was great. You didn't have to do it in any time when there weren't classes. And so whenever they had a chaos or a huge melee scene, it was no big thing.
And a hyper modern architecture, so it's clearly being built at that time, because this is like, look at the weird industrial, artistic, lots and lots of angles.
Shot by Laszlo Kovacs too, so he's coming off Easy Rider, he's on his way to Last Detail. This is his jam. It's right in his wheelhouse.
Wow, so. God, I forgot that's what this would be sandwiched in between. That's great.
And I love that at the top of the movie it said a film by the organization. Like that's usually a film by Ridley Scott, or a film by James Cameron. A film by the organization.
Man.
That's what this said.
That's so 60s, right?
And Rush took this story. It was a story of this guy who's going to get his teaching degree, but it became all about the revolution when we got into Richard Rush's hands. He got a writer, and he said, we're going to make this about the Vietnam War. He had a cool quote. He said, to me, the whole revolution is not a political revolution, but a personal one. It's the result of the inability of an entire generation on a personal, individual level to accept the disparities in the morality at the foundation of our society. It's a great quote. And so he takes that and he says, I'm infusing this original story with that. So I think that's where he amped up everything that was 70s and counterculture about the story.
And clearly he got a good first draft and just shot that. So
well, it was the most successful of those. I mean, if we look at the aftermath of the movie, 13 million domestic gross, that's the 21st highest grossing movie of 1970. 13 million will get you that back in 1970. I mean, that puts it at like a Knives Out, so that's like Knives Out level of box office.
So they really got the Easy Rider audience they were looking for, because I mean, this movie is looking for that audience big time.
Yeah, and more successful than Medium Cool and Zabriskie Point and films like it.
Yeah, that's true, because so many of those that came out of that, like the studios were like, oh, we want an Easy Rider so bad. And they did not get a lot of Easy Riders for all the young filmmakers they went to try and get one.
But you talk about the first draft of the script that he shot. It is refreshing to see a bunch of characters just openly talking about all the things that today you wouldn't even touch, or for fear of being canceled.
Right.
It's like they talk about race, they talk about sex and politics and all these other things. But I don't think I could be in a room with that character for more than like 2 seconds.
No, I mean
his character, Harry Bailey.
Well, I don't think
Lord.
And I don't think the movie cast him as the hero most of the time. Obviously, we love Candice Bergen, and when he's a jerk to her, he's a terrible character, even intentionally in this movie, that he constantly makes those turns into insufferable, which is his journey to not become that. But that only happens in the last few minutes, but.
Yeah, well, not to fit in with like a choice to not fit in with the establishment.
Yeah,
but there's one point where she comes over crying to him after the riots, and she's really, really upset. So he has sex with her.
Yeah, I know.
I was like, oh, he's hugging her. No, he's putting her on the ground and he's climbing on top of her and he's gonna have sex with her.
Yeah, I mean, he's such.
I just want to hold her at this point, but maybe I'm like a 2000s guy.
but he's never not called out for being a jerk. So there's some.
Absolutely, yeah.
It is telegraphing the basic college conversations that you have like this, so that's all over this movie. I mean, I have to imagine, now that you mentioned it was a box office hit, I have to imagine.
21st highest grossing. It's modest, but of these counterculture movies, it was the hit of them.
But yeah, it's bringing that like college campus feel of, and I don't know what else do you even see that in? Really, it's probably an outlier, interesting, brand new type of movie at the time. College movies before this were like Marx Brothers play a football game, or whatever.
The interesting thing is that I saw Gene Siskel, among other critics, trashed it, gave it like 1.5 stars, because there's no conflict till the latter half of the movie, or maybe 2/3 of the way through. I said before, and I think he's right. That's when the student body really becomes this presence in the film. Until then, it's kind of smoldering, I guess, underneath, and there's not much that Gould's character is doing, simply wandering between vignettes. He's like, okay, well, my car is crazy, and oh, my girl's crazy, oh, and I'm being kicked out of my place, and oh, I have no money, and oh, like it's just and here's my buddy Nick trying a different way to get out of the draft, and then finally the worlds collide of like the smoldering student anger, and then his place in it, and then it kind of becomes a movie.
Yeah, the problem is when that stuff swells up, it feels unearned. In a weird way. It's like, oh, we're going to, and it even goes to the medium cool 16 millimeter cameraman getting knocked down amongst the crowd. But you're like, we really haven't earned this in a weird way. This was a Mad Magazine movie, when he was in his car. It's got the. You ever be in? Jack Davis, the old Mad Magazine artist, and he did the Bad News Bears poster. There's an Animal House poster. Actually, that might have been not. But the Jack Davis would do these cartoony posters in the '70s. Every once in a while, you'll be in a movie, and this one is one of them, where you think to yourself, I wonder if Jack Davis did the poster for this movie. And I haven't looked it up, but it feels like a real Jack Davis poster of a movie up until maybe the last half hour,
Yeah, and you have some familiar faces in there. I noticed Jeff Corey, the guy who played Dr. Will Hunt, the one who really was upset with him being in the teaching department. And eventually they have a big standoff at the end where Elliott Gould yells. But he looked familiar, and sure enough, I looked him up. He played Wild Bill Hickok in Little Big Man, and I love that movie.
Oh, really?
So
that's awesome.
And among other things, big character actor. And he had Billy Bird as his landlady, who ended up playing an old lady and all sorts of old lady foils and all sorts of sitcoms and movies. One Crazy Summer, 16 Candles.
I know her from 16 Candles. Yes. In the scene where he gives the head of the education department and he come to a head, that whole library is such an architectural marvel. They're having this argument and it just stays in this wide shot because it's just glorious.
It's like they're in the Guggenheim or something. Or the Bradbury building, which is Roy Batty's place in Blade Runner.
Right.
Outside of the ornateness, that's still like
totally
staircases,
odd
and
angles. Yeah, it's an MC Escher building basically.
Yeah.
But when he has the blow up with that guy, that was over a cheating scandal, because he had fake Peter Fonda, who is basically 60s the person. Every other word is man. He's constantly smoking on a joint. He's just absolutely fully embroiled in the hippie lifestyle. He has that guy go take his exam for him. And from the very beginning, he writes the wrong name on the blue book and then crosses it out. And you're like, oh, this ain't going to go well.
Yeah. The music was super 60s. He had plenty of acoustic guitar. Rim shots, La 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 la.
At any point, acoustic guitar could come in to bridge one scene to another, and a very indicative of the time.
Or sometimes just to show you something else and go right back to the same scene. Like there was a scene where he's having an argument with one of the heads of the school, and they pull back from they're in the window in an office. They pull back to show a fight, and they bring in music. They go back in the same shot to the two shot of them arguing in the office, and the music fades away as they fade away from the scene outside, as if there's music playing outside.
Yeah.
And when they zoom outside to see it, they go back in again.
Yeah, Leonard Cohen's outside trying to bridge a scene. We'll just catch a little of that, and then we'll come back to this scene. But yeah, Leonard Cohen's trying to get us from one scene to the next.
Yeah, it's like Count Basie in the middle of the desert.
And my favorite scene might be that when fake Peter Fonda comes back and he hands him the book full of weed because he's being chased by cops. Another Jack Davis scene that could be painted on the poster if Jack Davis did one. And he says to him, "Can't I even have the luxury of hating you?" So there's some really good lines in this movie.
All right, so let's weigh this performance against the Harrison Ford definitive list of essentials. So, does Harrison Ford in this film show righteous anger? Hell no.
Hell no.
He's super hippie, laid back.
Oh my God,
guy.
He's so laid back. It's a very funny Harrison Ford to watch in that regard.
I mean, my wife's ass is a subversive painting.
Yeah, it's like, should we get to play this part? Should we get Harrison Ford or Chong?
So that naturally he doesn't point, but he does have the charm though. His smile and charm is on points. Yeah, so it's all smile and charm, no point and growl.
No point and growl. Different. He is not the romantic lead at all. Although I thought for a second he was going to have a romantic moment, because when he does the point of view shot, he leads he leads him in like he's the new boyfriend of Candice Bergen, but he's not. And in fact, he doesn't show up again for the rest of that scene. So what's he doing there? But anyway.
He's hanging in the periphery. He does a lot of that in this.
But I thought for a second when Harrison Ford answered the door, which he does a couple times, that I was like, oh, she went off with Harrison Ford, but she didn't.
So without being punchy and, righteous, how Harrison Ford is he in this in the percentage scale?
0%? Do you give him anything?
I gave maybe 20 for the I don't know, the hair.
Well, I guess he gets spotted 20 for just being Harrison Ford. I mean, as soon as he opened up that door, I just started laughing and was having a great time. And I'm like, it's just, I love Harrison Ford. Here he is. So you're right. He gets spotted 30% for being Harrison Ford to begin with. Because, I mean, I did enjoy seeing Harrison Ford show up.
And yeah, there's another melee at the end as the students converge on the school. And they fail to have Harrison Ford punch anyone. So I think the Harrison Ford punch count that we've been tallying since the beginning does not advance again this week.
No, he's been in 3 movies in a row with knockout brawls that he's in, and he throws no punches. This was another one where I was like, Harrison Ford could be in this crowd. It's a giant crowd of student protesters. He's definitely protesting. We haven't seen him protest in the movie, but he could be there easily. Oh, I kept waiting, hoping that maybe he'd be there and throw a punch. That'd be great.
So career total to date stalls at 1.
1. Jack Lemmon. All right, that's enough obscurity. The Ford Fiesta podcast returns next week and covers American Graffiti.
Yes. Of course, we still have that one Henry Winkler movie a couple weeks from now. That's going to be...
Shut up. In between episodes, don't forget to follow us on @TheMovieGuys everywhere on social media. And of course, themovieguys.net.
So you're ending this show?
Boring conversation anyway.